Hello, I'm Val Walker, and I'm a blogger for Psychology Today and the author of The Art of Comforting and another book called 400 Friends and No One to Call. And I'm happy to announce that for my latest blog post on Psychology Today, I wrote about sharing our moments of awe and wonder. And why Robyn and I really wanted to do this whole channel was about bringing back and reliving our experiences of awe and wonder. And we have so many great guests. I find guests, Robyn finds guests. We don't have to look real hard. We just know these wonderful people and we bring folks together. So that's me. I'm here, Val Walker, and I get to be a co-host with Robyn Houston Bean here. So you can talk a little about what you're up to.
Thanks, Val. Yes, I'm always so excited to sit beside you during this hour that we do every month. I am Robyn Houston Bean. I'm the founder of the Sun Will Rise Foundation. We do peer grief support for anyone who has experienced the death of someone they care about due to substance use related causes. And as I often say, I've sat with so many grieving people and heard these amazing encounters that they've had or experiences they've had, and they don't get to share it with the rest of the world. So I'm glad we're talking about it out loud, because there's so many things as grievers you just keep to yourself. And this is a really powerful thing that I think would be valuable to other grievers and just the rest of the population to hear. And I'm excited to listen to everybody's new stories that I have never heard before. And I think that will bring us to introducing Dave into the circle.
All right, David, I'm all interested in this.
Oh, hi, Val. Hi, Robyn. First of all, thank you for having me on your program today. It's a pleasure being here. Val and I initially met during the pandemic. I think connected with each other on Facebook or one of the social media platforms, and we just struck up a conversation. We had a lot of really very interesting and deep conversations during the pandemic, and a lot of it relates to serendipity as it involves the animals that come into our lives. And so, I mean, I think since I believe that everything that happens in the past dictates what happens in the present, that's how I find myself here today. And listening to Robyn's background, there's definitely some alignment with your background and what I used to do in a past life. So, or what seems like a past life, given what's been going on with me for the past 21 years. But let me give your audience just a very brief overview of who I am and what I do and what I did and where I am now. And first of all, I am a retired addictions professional. I was an addictions counselor and a clinical supervisor for an inpatient state-run substance abuse facility in upstate New York. I did that for 27 years and retired in July of 2012. In 2003, I began my career as an adjunct instructor at what was then Utica College, which is now Utica University. I'm now an adjunct professor of psychology, child life, and health studies, and I primarily teach care of the human spirit, death, dying, and bereavement, and impact of addiction on children and families. But I've taught a variety of different courses over the years at the college / now university. I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to embrace a career in the field of thanatology. I think anybody who gets into the field of death and dying doesn't do so because of professional interest. I think it's more so due to personal tragedy and circumstances. And for me, that's what happened. I'm no stranger to loss. I've danced with death since I've been 5 years old. First loss I can remember was my father leaving to raise my mother, or to raise me as an only child. My mother raised me as a single parent. She never got married again. I never heard from my father again, but I did find out that he had transitioned. And I use the term transitioned as opposed to death or passing away. Transition meaning for me, transition from the physical body to the spiritual world. He transitioned when I was 11 years old, but I didn't find out until I was 14 years old. And I've had a series of losses. My maternal grandmother, my maternal aunt two other women in my life who helped raise me besides my mother. And the list of losses, pets, friends just goes on and on and on. However, the loss that really shook my world, shook my universe, caused me to, at the age of 47, to really take a look at the type of person I wanted to be and the type of world that I wanted to live in, was the transition of my 18-year-old daughter, Janine, on March 1st, 2003, due to Avelia rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a rare and aggressive connective muscle tissue sarcoma. She transitioned 10 months after giving birth to her only child and my first granddaughter, Brianna. There were three significant dates in this transition. May 2nd was when Brianna was born. May 19th was when I got my master's degree officially conferred. I had a master's in social work degree, and it was conferred on May 19th. And May 26th, she was officially diagnosed. June 3rd, we got the prognosis from Dana-Farber Research Institute that she had a stage 4 tumor, for which there was no cure. And the only hope basically was a miracle, to put her cancer into remission with aggressive chemotherapy until a cure could be found. So at that point, I knew she was going to die. In the research I did there, the 5-year survival rate for her type of cancer was anywhere from 10 to 15%, depending on which research report you read. So I could say all the training in the world didn't prepare me for her transition on March 1st, 2003, and what was to follow after that. In 2009, I began and I had taken the path of what any bereaved parent I think would have done up until that point. I went to support groups. I tried to read books and talk to parents who had been farther along the path than I was, to see, what they were doing to get to where they got to and how they could get through what they did to move through grief at that point. I began to write for Living with Loss magazine. I wrote basically about grandparents' grief. I began to do workshops for the Compassionate Friends and eventually the Bereaved Parents of the USA. I expanded my writing to different online sources. I was doing pretty well. But in 2010, a pivotal moment came for me, when in November of 2010, I met, through pure serendipity, an individual by the name of Reverend Patty Farino, who's an interfaith minister. And she was living at the time in Long Island, and she's now living in South Carolina. It would take me another show to go through the serendipity, but basically, how she manifested in my life was through, again, serendipitous events that involved her not being able to register online for a conference that I was coordinating because her computer blacked out, to a conversation that we had in August, to in September, me stating my intention to the universe that I wanted to be where three presenters who I was driving up north after the conference to see the leaves change the season. They're having this intense spiritual conversation. I looked up to the sky and I said, I want to be where they are. And at that point, Patty had told me, she goes, look, I know you want to come, you're thinking about coming out for a presentation that one of your colleagues is doing in Long Island. If you decide to do that, you can stay with me and my husband for the weekend. One thing led to another. I found myself out there, and Patty facilitated a very powerful, spiritually transformative experience that convinced me that my daughter's consciousness will always survive, will be in a different form of energy, and that I could connect with that at any time. And prior to that, Val and Robyn, I had been very science-based. My view of the world was very empirically based. I rejected spirituality on a lot of different levels. But when I had that weekend with Patty, it was like my whole world opened up to different possibilities. That led to 10-year marathon conversations, 10 years of marathon conversations that we had to see how psychology and spirituality could intersect, to expand, to expand our belief systems and help individuals transcend challenge. And then eventually it led to us 10 years after we had met to co-author a book that we self-published on Amazon in 2021 called When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister, which details the spiritually transformative experience she facilitated, a sampling of those conversations that we had, and the importance of critical thinking and belief expansion for the present and future generations. So, and then on top of everything, in 2023, March 31st of 2023, I established my own podcast called the Teaching Journeys Podcast, which the mantra of the podcast is we're all students and teachers, so let's learn from each other. So I have had individuals who have transcended challenge, who have specific life skills to offer that can provide hope, can provide support, can provide tools to people who are trying to transcend their own challenges or just improve the quality of their life. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I've been on the path of a parent who's experienced a transition of a child for 21 years. There isn't anything I haven't explored about life, death, or life after death, or there isn't anything I haven't answered. But one of the things among many spiritual concepts that Patty introduced me to was Jamie Sam's and Ted Andrews' Native American teachings of animals and nature. And that has been a major influence in, my thinking and expanding my belief system and believing in the power of animal medicine and animal teachings to help create greater awareness about ourselves and create connection to something that's greater than ourselves, which are two basic elements of spiritual development. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and the story is going to continue to evolve until I transition. So,
I could feel what you were talking about on a deep level, deep understanding, and the change that happens when you experience something like that brings you to a whole different place that you never thought you would be. So, and reflected in the other grievers that I've sat with too, as well, they're open to so many new things and new ideas. And I myself would also say I was probably not very spiritual before Nick's death, and something changed. And I don't know when it happened or exactly that point, but I know it's a lot of these moments of awe and wonder that contributed to me having more spirituality and being open to something different. So I would love to just hear everything you have to say. I don't know if we have enough time for all of it. We might have to have part 2.
yeah. Well,
I'm all ears.
okay. Well, first of all, Robyn, please accept my condolences for the death of your child. Every time I hear of another parent who has lost a child, experienced a transition of a child, I'm right there. I know exactly the feeling of trying to negotiate a world where, in ideal world, parents shouldn't have to bury their children. And it's just trying to wrap my head around the fact that, we're carrying our children's legacy as opposed to our children carrying our legacy. And that was something that took me a long time to wrap my head around. And I probably would have still been in the, and there were some things that were happening. And this story that I'm going to tell you was one of the, I think I'm trying to, it was several years ago, but I think it was shortly after I met Patty that this happened. Yeah, it was after I met Patty that this happened. But I hadn't believed in spirituality, and there were some seeds that were being planted for me about specific signs that I was thinking I was getting from my daughter. And one of the things that Patty had asked me in our conversations that, well, do you believe in signs? And I said, not really. That's not something I'm really aligned with. But I think my daughter sent me a double rainbow on Father's Day. And it's not that as I look back on it, I knew that there were some things that science couldn't explain. But I couldn't figure out how I could integrate that I just couldn't figure out how I could integrate that into my current world. But after I met Patty, I began to embrace more spiritual concepts, but particularly she turned me on to Jamie Sams and Ted Andrews. So in the background, I know we talked about this before we started recording. You'll see my friend the Crow, or actually Raven. Ravens are bigger versions of Crow. This was taken at Utica. It was then Utica College, now Utica University. It was just a beautiful picture of he was just overseeing his territory. One of the things about crows are highly revered in Native American culture. I think their feathers bound the book of I think it's sacred law. Um, Crows can teach us so much. They can teach us to overcome fear. If a hawk or any bigger animal and bigger bird invades their territory, they'll go right after them. They are extremely intelligent. They can mimic human voices. They also have acute memories. They know which humans have treated them well and which ones haven't. They are also omnivores. They can take whatever the earth gives them. They can take, whether it's meat, whether it's vegetation, whether it's grain. They teach us about adaptability, and during grief or any other type of life-altering challenge, adaptability is something that we have to learn. The crow is also my favorite mantra, and this is from the Sam's book, Medicine Cards, is honor the past as your teacher, honor the present as your creation, and honor the future as your inspiration. Crow is about past, present, and future coming together to shape our current and the reality that we wish to co-create in conjunction with the universe. So they have a variety of different teachings, and the biggest how this manifested, and it's kind of is that I was flying to a Compassionate Friends conference. I remember exactly where this was. I believe it was I forget. I think it was Orange County. Yes, it was Orange County, for a Compassionate Friends conference. And I was really nervous because the airline that I usually flew apparently didn't think had service there. As it turns out, I typed in the name of the airport wrong. It could have flown my go-to airline, but the universe had more teachings in store for me. So I was talking to a friend of mine who's a shamanistic holistic practitioner, told her about my fear about flying. And she goes, well, why don't you call in Crow? Call in Crow medicine, call in Crow for the flight. And again, as I mentioned, Crow helps us overcome fear. Um, and I said, okay. So I called in Crow any which way I could before the flight. So we took off from Syracuse, New York. Just as we get into the air, there is a single crow that's flying along the left wing of the plane, as if it's like guiding me to our destination. So, and obviously we got there safely, we got there on time. Um, and the airline that I flew had some, let's say, sketchy, inconsistent pieces where there were inconsistent times where the service wasn't as great as it should have been. But we hit them at the right time this time. So we flew, so we touched down safely. The day before we left the conference, I don't know, have any of you been to Orange County in Southern California?
No.
Okay. What are the chances of finding a single crow feather in the pristine grass of downtown Orange County?
Pretty slim, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, you would probably have a better chance of seeing a sacred deity than you would finding a single crow feather. So my wife Sherry and I were outside of the hotel, and we were walking, all of a sudden she looked down, and there was a single crow feather that was setting up in the grass. No other crow feather around, just that one crow feather. She picked it up and she gifted it to me. Okay. So that was a further sign that Crow had been with me on the trip and was going to continue to be with me. And then when we were waiting to take off to go back to Syracuse, there were three crows that were kind of like right in the airplane where the airplanes were about ready to take off. And one of them, and crows have, if you've ever seen crows walk, they have this really like cute, very distinctive strut. And this crow was strutting around checking each one of the planes as if he had appointed himself as a head of maintenance, as if he was, and I interpreted this, and this is my own subjective interpretation, as he was looking at me and he said, Dave, we got this, so don't worry, we're going to get you home safe. So that was, all of this occurred as a result of a prayer that I stated is bring Crow on the trip with me. I want Crow's strength. I want Crow's ability to overcome fear. I want that with me for this flight. And sure enough, it manifested. I'm a firm believer that if we state our intention to the universe, they'll find a way to make that intention come true. So that was, to me, one of the more, I think, interesting and I think awe-inspiring experiences. I still talk about this. I still get an experience of awe because this is something you can't make up. And what I tell individuals is you could tell me you don't believe what happened, but unless you're in my skin, you're not in a position to really assess whether or not it's believable. What you need to be able to see, especially if you're a clinician, especially if you're doing bereavement support, is what is the effect that this experience had on the person's belief system? How did you feel after the experience happened? What did it do to transform your grief or create a heightened sense of spirituality? How do you see you incorporating this to help you find peace after transition, incorporating what you learned from this? Animals have something to teach us, and every animal has something to teach us, whether it's a domesticated animal, a wild animal. Each one of these animals have teachings. I know Native Americans have, and I'm paraphrasing this, they believe that everything has a spirit. They believe that everything has something to teach us. Everything in nature, whether it's trees, whether it's rocks, they all have this spiritual, universal energy. And I'm paraphrasing this as my own interpretation that needs to be respected, and everything is in service to us. And our animals are the same way. Guarantee, whenever I've had an animal cross my path and I've taken a look at the teaching, it's 90% of the time has been relevant to either something I've been dealing with in the present or something that I'm considering dealing with in the future. So, and I'm a firm card carrying believer in that, we are all one, and that includes being, with our 2 and 4-legged friends. So that's my story that I wanted to share with you tonight.
The fact that you saw that in multiple places and you put the intention, like that's like literal, like some of these are just, wow, how did this happen? You put it out there and it came back to you is just so awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, it was immediate. I mean, I saw that crow on the left wing of that plane. I had the window seat. It was almost immediately after takeoff. It was like something surreal. I'm looking and I'm saying, wow. I said, you want to talk about manifestation of intention, an immediate manifestation, an immediate reinforcement that what I asked for was heard by God or the universe or whoever you believe your higher power to be. That was powerful for me. Yeah, there's another thing that I thought about too, is that I've had animals come to me in dreams.
Yeah.
I had a wolf come to me in a dream, and I called it. It was like I remember the dream. I was outside of a fence, and this wolf came, and I thought he was going to attack me. This wolf came, and he kind of I called him the shape-shifting wolf. He shaped his body so he could get through a small crack. He stood right beside my left-hand side, and left side, right side. Left side's feminine energy, right side is masculine energy. Stood on my left side, and we were just looking ahead together. And the wolf is another animal that I resonate with because he's the communicator, he's the teacher, and this is what I do. I teach. So, and it was interesting because I think at that time prior to that, I had seen a Carlos Santana concert. And I remember he had he had an album called Shapeshifter, and I was dreamt of the shape-shifting wolf. And so I looked at his album cover, and there was something I think it was called the Great Spirit Prayer, and I think there was something in there, and I need to look at it again, but I think there was something in there that basically talked about I think the message was sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and that comes to that in grief is that so a lot of times we hold ourselves responsible for things we had no control over. So the wolf was kind of reminding me of that teaching moment in conjunction with, again, my recent experience at a Carlos Santana concert with the title of his album being Shapeshifter, that I probably needed to, show grace to myself and, just to continue to do that and not hold myself responsible for things I should have seen, things I should have done as I believe I should have done, after my daughter, during my daughter's illness and before. So, I have had a bear come to me, and bears about introspection and, going within. So I've gotten messages from animals in my sleep. And again, it's all because I opened myself to crow and also wolf medicine as well too, because I opened myself up to it. It comes to me in a variety of different ways. And I just wake up and I just smile and say, wow, who would have thought I'd be at the stage in my life where I'd be continuing to experience awe by things that were not scientific.
Right, things just need to be black and white, right? There needed to be a reason for things when you're doing it that way. And I think the same thing. Like I don't need to have answers as much as anymore as just live and experience stuff. And I think that's like one gift that I got that I didn't have that before. And I'm thankful that my eyes have been opened up to so many different things. You think Val picked the correct title, Healing Through Wonder?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Because I think once we lose that sense of wonder, we lose a lot of our zest for living. And I don't, in my fast approaching my 69th year of life, I don't ever want to lose my sense of awe about anything. Once I start losing that, I need to check for a pulse, or I need to really just evaluate where I am if that's the case. But I always, whenever I hear stories from somebody else that are very similar to mine, or it's just like, I just like smile and I'm just thinking, wow, I'm inspired. And that keeps my sense of awe and wonder up too, hearing other people's stories.
Right. The other beautiful thing both Robyn and you, Dave, say, and I so agree, is that when you have a moment, say, observing the squirrels or the chipmunks or the crows, and in my case, other birds, it makes us more observant. It brings us mindful. We're mindful. We're not up there in our heads somewhere thinking about stuff. It brings us into the present moment, which I find a real blessing. It's not an escape. It's not like airy fairy spirituality out there somewhere. No, this is here now, things that take your breath away right in the moment, right in front of us. And I think that is so refreshing, especially if we can get off our screens and go have these experiences, you know. So
Oh, yeah.
On Wonder's not a heady thing out
No.
there in spaceland where you escape the world. It brings you into the world.
Well, when you immerse yourself in nature, even for half an hour, it has definite therapeutic effects in terms of reducing stress levels, probably reducing cortisol levels, which
Yeah.
contribute to high stress levels, reducing anxiety, feeling that you're connected to something greater than yourself. I mean, I climbed one mountain in my life, and it was with a friend of mine. And that climb taught me a lot about grief. It taught me a lot about support. And also, when I got to the summit, I was looking at a tree, and it was almost as if that tree was outstretching his branches, wanting to give me a big hug. And, and I noted that, and I sat and I wrote something that came to mind about that. It was almost like that tree was welcoming me home. The summit was, it was the top, was that moment for me that was It was said, here, I'm welcoming you home to my home. Your home is now my home. And
Well,
that was powerful for me.
that sense of belonging and home, I really see a lot of us who have been through both grief and trauma, and that can bring in addiction too, but grief and trauma, one commonality about our suffering is feeling lonely, really, really lonely. And something about these awe and wonder moments, like your tree or a bird encounter, it takes us out of that loneliness. And also the researchers say it brings down inflammation.
Yep.
A lot of trauma survivors have a lot of problems with illness due to inflammation in the body. And so it's healing.
No, I was just going to say that it's almost contagious, this type of thing. When someone talks about it in group, even if we've been on a totally different subject, one person opens up a little piece of something that happened to them that made them feel connected outside of themselves.
Right.
And then everyone else starts to share a little something for themselves. And then we don't get into it as deep as we're able to hear with our guest on this. But I can tell when a group happens like that, we leave lighter than that group really started. And I feel like that's so healing to grieving people, to just feel and understand how other people have experienced it. And it allows them to open up themselves more to other things. And now, like we've said so many times, I'm going to see a crow now, and I'm going to think of Dave. I'm going to think of his daughter, and I'm going to just be like, okay, hello, like we're connected now in some way, even though I didn't know you before. I feel now I have this, spiritual connection to you through a crow. And I know now I'm going to see a crow. I know it. Like I haven't seen one in so long, but I now know that I'm going to see one.
Well, and the other story that I do have, and I really didn't, because basically I know you've gotten a lot of stories about animals representing signs from our loved ones, but I have to tell this one story. I have the picture to prove it,
Yeah.
except I don't have it. I didn't have it handy, but I can send it to you, and if you need to use it as part of the show notes or post it somewhere. But these were two friends of mine that were visiting their daughter in Alaska, and they were driving on the Denali Highway. The Denali Highway is just like, I think, this unpaved 135-mile stretch of road. My two friends know the history with Janine. They know she transitioned on March 1st. And a lot of times when an individual manifests themselves as a sign to other individuals, when that story gets told to us, that our loved one are coming to us through those individuals who have shared the event. So when they came back from Alaska, we went out to dinner and they gave me this picture. And now the Denali Highway is 135 miles, as I mentioned earlier. They took a picture of this raven about as big as a raven that I have in my background, sitting on top of marker 31 on the Denali Highway. And crows usually, when they'll fly away. When they see any, when they fly away, they will fly away when they see any type of person would approach them. But my friend Tammy told me, she goes, it's like this crow was waiting there saying, will you take the picture already? So she took the picture and presented it to me. And I was speechless, which doesn't happen too. I was tongue-tied because I was so awe-inspired by that. I mean, what are the odds of seeing a raven land on marker 31 on a remote highway called the Denali Highway when there's 135 miles of highway? Now, could I've interpreted that as a sign from my daughter? Absolutely. Was it also a sign from crow and raven reinforcing that, yeah, I'm here, and I'm part of, and there's also a Native American, I think, belief. And again, I'm paraphrasing this, that if a bird flies to the heavens and that bird disappears, they are sending a message to Great Spirit.
What does 31 mean again?
3/1
Dave?
is March 1st is when Janine transitioned. March 1st
Oh,
was the month and day that she transitioned.
okay.
And so they knew immediately what that meant because they knew the history with my daughter. And they're both very intuitive, and they presented this to me as if to say, yeah, I mean, she was on the trip with us, but obviously her energy manifested in the form of a crow, which is again an animal that I hold in high reverence for their teachings and its presence in my life. So, and again, it's something you couldn't make this stuff up even if you tried.
Mm. And it's so lovely that a friend did it, right? So, and that's what happened. Like, Val, you told me your story, and then I was like, wait, I went into the store and here's this big picture of a blue heron, right? And I send it back to Val, and then same things happen with some of our people with the dragonflies or something else that has happened. And I always get people sending me suns and things like that, you know, or it's something that says the sun will rise, you know,
Yeah.
a graphic. Someone's like, I'm in Philadelphia and there's graffiti on the wall and it says the sun will rise. And I've immediately thought of you and Nick and this connection. And so it's lovely when someone else picks up on something that you've told them that you found amazing or wonderful. And then they hold it
Mhm.
with them and bring it back to you.
And I said earlier before, you may want to edit this out, that I couldn't remember any other stories involving crow. Another one came to me just now that it was, but I don't know how much time we have for that.
We can keep going.
Okay,
We're moving.
okay,
This is good.
okay. All right. This is another one that in one of the my email address is bootsyandangel@gmail.com, and you probably wonder, what does this have to do with On Wonder? But Bootsy and Angel were my daughter Janine's two very revered cats. Bootsy became my cat after Janine transitioned. Um, that cat would get me up at 4:30 in the morning. He would get me moving when I didn't want to move. He would sit on my lap. He would let me take care of him. He'd let me love him up. He loved me when I had trouble loving myself.
Yeah.
He transitioned just before Easter weekend in 2016. He was in his 21st year of life.
Mm.
And we buried him in the backyard of our house after we had him put to sleep. And it was raining, and I remember how gloomy I felt. I mean, and pet loss is just as intense as any other type of loss. The relationship we have with our animals is based on unconditional love, acceptance, and a lot of times we have difficulty getting that consistently from our human counterparts. But animals are just about unconditional love and acceptance, and I was really grief-stricken. In fact, I wrote a blog about it for the Huff Post called Birds in the Rain. I wrote this in like about 45 minutes. This was one of the few blogs that came through me, and it talked about the pure serendipity that involved crow specifically. And the one part of this was that after we had buried him in the backyard, I was looking out at the deck window, and there were three crows in the trees. They were cawing, as if they were cawing their tribute to my beloved cat. And
Oh.
I remember at the end of that saying a prayer. And this gets back to what I talked about in terms of when birds fly to the heavens and they disappear, they're sending a message to great spirits. So I said a prayer, went something like, I saw a crow out there. I said, I'd like you to take a message to Bootsy, telling him how much he meant to me, that he's always going to be in my heart, that I'm never going to forget him. As soon as I got done with that prayer, three crows started flying off into the distance. So that was another moment of serendipity that involved another member of the animal kingdom, a cat that was highly beloved to my daughter, became highly beloved to me after she transitioned, and all became highly beloved to those crows that I have, whose teachings and presence as I mentioned, I revere and unconditionally. So that's probably the last story I have about crow, but I think those are three good ones.
Remarkable. That one is,
Mm.
you know,
It's
I
a
love.
send off. That's the way I feel.
Yep. Yep. It's a send off. Those crows were going to take that message to him. And they just
Mhm.
flew right off into the distance. And I was like, wow,
Mm. Mhm.
Mm.
I wish
I
there was
love-
more words than wow. I feel like I
Yeah, I
say it
know.
all the time, but it fits,
I mean,
like,
so some of the words I had, I couldn't really probably say on the air, but I mean, it was just like, but it's like,
mm,
it was just like, I was just sitting there and I just couldn't,
yeah.
it was just like, it's just unbelievable. I just said, you know, we are so small in comparison to what the universe has to offer. And
Mhm.
those things like that just remind me of how small we are in comparison and how, if we allow ourselves to, we can connect to so much that's greater than ourselves. That's beyond what we can see with our senses. If we allow ourselves to, if we get past that fear and whatever scrutiny we may have from others who might say, hey, it's a little bit out there.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think they will get a lot out of this. And I know people are always clamoring for more and more. So this is really exciting to have you on here. And I think next month, Val, it's just going to be me and you talking with a little more science, which that'll be a little different. So
Little different, but we always add a few stories. We always have a little story to go with it, one way or another.